Man, he only disappoints his father in a town that hates dragons. Hiccup, be friends with the most feared dragon of all. If you have felt like you are different from others, this movie may be for you. Its multiple symbolisms will surprise you. Stoic the Bast is the leader of the Viking clan. He is huge, rough, and a great warrior. His skills are excellent, as on Berk Island, where his tribe resides, he has a big problem with pests eating his food. However, these pests are not mice or mosquitoes, but dragons. The dragons attack the Vikings and steal their food, so the Vikings try to kill them to finish them off in Berk. Defeating a dragon is everything. The more ferocious the creature, the more fame and prestige it earns, and Stoic is excellent at his job, except for one reason: his son Hiccup. Hiccup is clumsy, weak, and lacks skills for combat. He always wants to help, but only ends up making things worse during the night, in the middle of a ferocious attack by the dragons, and as he heads to Gober's workshop to fulfill his assigned job, preparing tools for the others, the villagers see him walking and get frustrated. They warn him to take refuge immediately, since they know of the disasters it usually causes. Already in the workshop, Hiccup sees like the rest. The Vikings, including their friends, take on the most difficult tasks. Among them is Astrid, who he is in love with, and Paul insists Gober let him join the fight. What he wants most in the world is to end the life of a dragon, as that would change his life forever, gain the respect of others, no longer be considered a weak man, and perhaps win Astrid's heart. Gober tells him he can't even lift an axe, which he'll never be able to do. However, Hiccup shows him a machine he built, knowing it couldn't reach its target. Only with physical strength did he design a machine too. Let me do it for him. Despite this, Gober tells him the only way you can take down a dragon is if you stop being like that and point at Hiccup's entire body. This one answers him, but you just pointed out my whole being. And Gober tells him exactly, stop being yourself altogether. The most desired dragon of all is Night Fury. No one's seen him, I've never been able to catch him. Only their roars can be heard, and the havoc they cause with their fire breath can be witnessed. He never steals food, never shows himself, and never fails his Satan. Because no one has managed to kill a Night Fury, and that's why Hiccup wants to be the first to do it, which would make him a true hero. While Gober goes out to fight, Hiccup takes the opportunity to take his machine and try to catch the Night Fury. He focuses his shot, hears the roars and throws his nets, hears the roar of the Night Fury, and sees the figure fall from the sky. He's done it, he's captured the most feared dragon of all. At that moment, a monstrous nightmare dragon hears Hiccup's cries of joy and approaches to attack him. The dragon throws fire at Hiccup and sets fire to a structure, causing disasters in the Stoic, Hippo's father, observes the situation and throws himself into combat against the dragon, facing him with only his fists. Stoic demonstrates his innate ability to defeat dragons. He needs nothing more. He is a rough and ruthless man in battle. He ends up in the attack of the dragons, and Stoic just watches his son angrily. Hiccup tries to remedy the situation by telling him that he caught a Night Fury, but Stoic doesn't believe him at all. The latter gets angry and yells at his son, stop. Already every time you go out, everything ends in disaster. You can't see that I have bigger problems. Winter is coming and I have a whole tribe to feed. You are many things, son, but you will never be a dragon slayer. And well, he heads home and all the villagers, including his friends, make fun of him. This story presents us with a great conflict. We have the Viking society of Berk, in which physical strength, violence, and impulsivity are not only valued but represent fundamental pillars of their culture. Here the clan is prioritized over individuals, and each member is expected to conform to strict social norms to make a legitimate Viking in Berk. You have to meet a standard imposed by society, be strong, rough, and fit perfectly into the group. This establishes a dilemma in Hippo. Although he claims to want to defeat a dragon, the truth is that we do not notice in him an innate inclination for violence in his essence, and therefore pacifist, framed contrast with the social expectations of Berk, who at the same time feels the pressure to mold himself according to social norms in order to comply with what society demands of all its members. And the pressure is even greater because his father Amwith is the leader of the tribe. This makes it more complicated because Hiccup not only struggles to find his place in society, but also to gain the acceptance of his father, who also sees him as a disappointment. I find this conflict fascinating because it highlights how societies set expectations for their members, who face pressure to meet them despite their natural diversity. And this tendency to homogenize personalities in the name of unity and common identity can be counterproductive by sacrificing individuality and not taking advantage of each person's different qualities. Society and the collective are enriched by its diversity of people. By forcing everyone to fit into the same mold, great wealth is lost and dissatisfied individuals are generated. Later, Stoic meets with the other Vikings to come up with a plan to invade the dragon's nest so he can put an end to all their troubles. As they prepare for the dangerous expedition, Stoic seeks Gober's advice, expressing concern for his son. He doesn't know what to do to help him. This one tells him since Hiccup was a little boy, he was always different from the rest. I can't teach him how to fight dragons because I'm afraid they're not. He will survive even a few seconds. Stoic is not a bad father. He really wants the best for his son, but his main difficulty is that he fails to understand him since he is radically opposite to him. Since he was a child, Stoic has met the standards of Viking society with complete ease and has been very successful in it, but Hiccup is very different. Gober tells him that he has to give him the opportunity to learn how to fight dragons. Even though he thinks it's a bad idea, Stoic agrees, entrusts him with the task of training all the young men, including Hiccup in the meantime, and then enters the forest in search of the Night Fury he managed to capture. After several hours, he finds the traces, and a few meters later, he discovers the dragon trapped in the nets. And he gets excited. He can't believe it. He caught the most feared and precious dragon of all. He approaches and takes his dagger, preparing to make the sacrifice that would earn him his father's approval. However, the beast looks him in the eyes, and this makes Hiccup hesitate. He experiences deep empathy for this creature and feels remorse for having trapped it. So he uses his dagger to break the bonds and set him free. At that moment, the Night Fury assaults him and corners him against one. And so he's afraid and he fears for his life, but the beast just looks him in the eye, lets out a roar, and then flies away. I had spared her life as a gesture of gratitude. When he meets his father, he informs him that he no longer wants to fight dragons. However, I Am With does not listen to his son, gives him an axe and informs him that his training to fight dragons will begin the next morning. Vikings are real-life warriors who came from the Norse peoples of Scandinavia, a region in northern Europe. In their mythology, dragons were fearsome and powerful creatures who embodied chaos and chaos. Destruction, these entities with their intimidating looks, sturdy beds and fire breath were living symbols of fear and danger. Therefore, facing a dragon represented a challenge of great courage, so they symbolized almost invincible natural forces. However, in many Norse legends, dragons were also seen as guardians of treasure. This made them representations of the final obstacle in a hero's path. Thus, the confrontation with a dragon frequently symbolized a hero's internal struggle against his. Your own personal fears and challenges. Remember this very well because it's going to be very important for the end. This clearly illustrates why Stoic insists so much that Hiccup destroys dragons because his insistence is deeply rooted in the Viking culture he grew up in, a culture that sees dragons as the embodiment of chaos and destruction. For Stoic, as leader of the clan, facing and defeating these beings is a cultural obligation and a duty to his community. Hiccup had grown up learning those traditions, for he had already begun to internalize his father's mentality. However, now that you've been face to face with the dragon, things are about to change. Gober begins to train all the youngsters, but clearly iPod proves to have no skills for combat upon finishing and returning to the place where he found Night Fury. And to his surprise, he finds that the dragon is still there. Despite having been released from the restraints, he cannot fly because during the fall he suffered an injury that caused him to lose half of his tail. Now the dragon is permanently disabled. The animal notes the present of Hiccups, and he decides to retire that night. Hiccup studies the Book of Dragons, which contains information about each type of dragon sighted. Each dragon category is labeled as extremely dangerous. Remove immediately. However, upon reaching the page where the information about the Night Fury should be, he realizes that the space is blank, since no Viking had managed to capture it until that point. Meanwhile, Stoic and his men approach the dragon's nest. His plan is to destroy it so those animals have to move out. Far from seeing the young people continue their training under the Gober's supervision, Astrid excels in this, managing to pass all the tests with the different dragons attacking her, all extremely ferocious. However, a failure, and this bothers Astrid. She gets angry at his incompetence. Later, Hiccup returns to the place where the Night Fury is and this time brings him a meal. The dragon appears in front of him and opens his mouth to eat the fish, and he realizes that the animal is chewing, but he is surprised to see that when devouring the food, he takes out his teeth. He tries to approach the dragon, but he gets scared and moves away. This continues until finally he gains his trust, extends his hand towards him, and the dragon lets himself be caressed. They had understood each other and connected. Then the Night Fury runs out, and a moment later, talking to Gober, he tells Hiccup that all dragons are ruthless beasts that must be exterminated, but Hiccup doesn't think this is right. Throughout history, the Vikings of Berke have passed on generation after generation the belief that dragons are terrifying creatures, enemies by nature that must be eliminated. But Hiccup's interaction with the Night Fury challenges this narrative by taking the time to zoom in. To observe and understand the dragon, Hiccup discovers a different reality, that dragons are not the ruthless beasts that their culture has painted, and this leaves us a great message of how to take the time to get closer and know the other. It can tear down years of baseless fear and hatred. In this way, this story seems to be a perfect metaphor for the earthquake, xenophobia, and fear of the other Demberg age. As in many societies, people learn to be afraid of others without ever knowing them. Prejudices and fear are transmitted from generation to generation without critical questioning. Hiccup, as he approaches Night Fury, shows us how important it is not to get carried away by what we have always believed. Instead of assuming that all dragons are evil and dangerous as they were taught in their village, Hiccup chooses to try to understand the dragon. The same is true when we decide to meet people from other countries, religions, or cultures or beliefs instead of clinging to erroneous ideas or unfounded fears. Thanks to this approach, and people like him discover that most of the time there is no reason to fear others, they discover that we're not that different from them. After all this, it makes us reflect that the other is often feared, not for what he really is, but for what he has believed he is at that moment. And so he decides to leave and heads to the workshop where he begins working on a prosthesis for his new friend. He spends all night creating the other missing half of the Night Fury's tail. He then brings food to the dragon, but when he finds an eel in the food, the animal gets scared, hiccups it away, but they take note of it. While the dragon eats, Hiccup takes the opportunity to install the prosthesis, and it works. The dragon can fly again, but she needs Hiccups to hold her up at all times, so they'll have to work on that back. In training, all the young people fight the dragon, but it begins to obey Hiccup. Everyone is surprised. Hiccup manages to tame the dragon and make the cage return, in that we see that Hiccup has an eel inside his sack, which he used to make the dragon retract. No one can believe it, and this keeps happening as Hiccup spends time improving Chimuelo's prosthetic, the name he gave his dragon, and living with him, he begins to learn more about dragons. For example, he realizes that they like the steppe. This is why it now takes steps to calm them down during training. His knowledge gives him an advantage over everyone else, and this leads him to gain fame as the best dragon tamer. However, something seems suspicious to Astrid, who used to bring them before. Little by little, with each attempt, the prosthesis works better, and the friendship between Hiccup and Chimuelo becomes stronger. Soon, Hiccup manages to be a device to control Chimuelo's prosthesis so that both can embark on flight together. After days of travel, Stoic and his men return to sea with their failed mission. Gober informs him that Hiccup has become a celebrity in the village, and his father cannot believe it at that moment, and he is with Chimuelo and they finally fly outdoors. However, he accidentally releases the dragon, causing them both to fall. Since Chimuelo can't adjust the equipment himself, they are about to collide, but Hiccup quickly manages to get back on the dragon's back. Together they navigate through a labyrinth of rocks, and to celebrate their great triumph, Chimuelo fires one of his bursts of energy. Then, while they pause to rest, some dragons appear in search of food. But the Fury... Nighthawk is not willing to share his fish with them. However, Hiccup decides to feed one of these dragons, which results in a friendship. At that moment, he realizes that everything the Vikings believed about the behavior of dragons was wrong. That night, Stoico is very happy with his son's performance and congratulates him effusively, and also gives him a Viking hat as shown by that price. However, instead of feeling happy and feeling that the weight of his secret is eating away at his conscience, he knows that if his father discovered his friendship with Chimuelo, he would endanger his life of his friend, and he would be more disappointed in him than ever. The next day, Hiccup wears the hat during his battle against the Bronco. Astrid orders him to step aside as he wants to win the competition. However, when he prepares to attack the animal, Hiccup has already managed to bring it down using his knowledge about dragons. Therefore, the old woman grants him the title of winner of this duel. Now, the next step you must overcome before you become a true Viking is to end the dragon's life. Knowing that he would never be able to do it, Hiccup packs his things and goes in search of Chimuelo, planning to leave with his friend. However, Astrid shows up to thwart his plans. She orders him to reveal her secret and explain how he became so skilled at dealing with dragons. Furious at having lost the duel, she attacks Hiccup and Chimuelo comes to her aid. However, the boy manages to calm his friend and stop Astrid. She tries to run away, threatening to tell her all his secrets, but Hiccup, with the help of Chimuelo, stops her and takes her for a walk. They fly so high they can even touch the clouds, and Astrid is amazed by what she sees. Suddenly, several dragons appear next to him and Chimuelo begins to follow them. Minutes later, they enter a cave and watch as the animals throw their prey into a great abyss. At that very moment, a monstrous and gigantic dragon emerges from the bottom of the cave and devours one of its prey. Seeing the humans, the monster attacks Chimuelo, and all the dragons leave the cave in despair when they return to the island. Astrid understands that the dragons are stealing all the food from the Vikings because they are forced to feed the queen, otherwise they would be devoured. He tells Astrid that he can't tell anyone, since if they discover Chimuelo's life, friend will be in danger. Astrid agrees, but before leaving, she thanks him for everything and gives him a kiss on the face. The next morning, Hiccup must take the final test to officially become a Viking, and the entire clan, including his father, are watching. In this decisive test, you will have to end the life of a dragon. Your opponent is the monstrous nightmare. When the dragon approaches, Hiccup tries to calm him down and befriend him, followed by his Viking hat, and says, "I'm not like them," referring to the rest of the Vikings. This infuriates his father, who begins to scream, which frightens the dragon, the monstrous nightmare. He begins to chase Hiccup, and kilometers away, Chimuelo hears his friend's screams. The Night Fury goes through the forest to rescue him. The monstrous nightmare cornered by Hiccup, but luckily Chimuelo seems just in time, destroys the bars and enters the ring to protect the boy. The monstrous nightmare returns to the cage, but the Vikings rush to capture Chimuelo. Hiccup tries to stop them, but he ends up being captured. Stoic gets angry with his son since he feels betrayed and tells him the dragons have finished off hundreds of our people, to which Hiccup responds, "We have finished off thousands." Of them, Hiccup tries to explain to him that the only reason the dragons take his food is to take it to their queen. Faced with this, I'm furious and tell him, "So you already know where the nest is and you didn't tell me." Hiccup can see the plan forming in his father's mind and he starts to worry. He tries to stop it, but his father completely ignores it, and before he leaves, he tells him, "You chose them over us. You are not a Viking, you are not my son." This moment is devastating. A father is denying his child simply because he does not meet his expectations and beliefs. Unlucky. Again, these kinds of situations are not exclusive to movies. There are also people in real life who do no harm to anyone and who are rejected by their families because of differences in religion, orientation, or just for having beliefs or lifestyles that deviate from what the family considers normal, I insist, without harming anyone. Like Hiccup, these people face the painful decision of being true to themselves or giving up the love and acceptance of their loved ones. In these cases, the relationship between father and son is totally subordinated to a political ideology. He leaves. Make a true emotional bond to become a relationship based solely on compliance with certain ideological criteria. You are only my son if you adjust to my vision of the world, so I am with Hiccup reduces to a mere object type, becomes an object because his father uses him as an instrument to fulfill his vision and purpose, and this approach transforms the relationship to a form of control. In essence, it is not a true relationship but a form of manipulation, and he is also stunned and stoic when he leaves the room. The gravity of the words he just said weighs on him, but he continues with his plan to use Chimuelo as compass to reach the dragon's nest. The Vikings prepare and set sail with the dragon as prisoner. Astrid tries to console Hiccup and asks why you didn't eliminate Chimuelo when you first saw him in the woods, and well, he gets upset and answers, "I'm the first Viking in 300 years who didn't dare to end up with a dragon," but Astrid answers, "But you were the first to ride one and fly with him." Faced with this, Hiccup lets down his guard and confesses to him, "I couldn't take his life. Because he looked as scared as I did, I saw him and I saw myself." This dialogue is key in the film because Hippo was the only Viking able to overcome prejudices and misconceptions about dragons because, unlike the rest who met the standards of brute strength, impulsiveness, and aggression, Hiccup, with his more passive, reflective, and empathetic nature, stopped to look at the dragon and recognize himself in it. This non-standard quality became, paradoxically, his greatest strength. If Hiccup had managed to fit in and hide what made him different, he would never have broken with the misconceptions of his society. Empathy. Hiccup took a deeper dimension by considering three fundamental aspects. First, in their culture, dragons have always been considered their worst enemy. Second of all of them, the Night Fury stands out as the most feared, and this is due to its mysterious nature. No one had ever seen her, and this one does not remember how fear often arises from ignorance and the importance of approaching the unknown to deny prejudices and discover the truth. And finally, the black color of Night Fury adds an additional layer of mystery and fear, as culturally its color is associated with the night, the evil, and the dangerous by. So Chimuelo becomes the perfect personification of our unfounded fears of the unknown. Chimuelo represents both the human tendency to fear what we do not understand and also the possibility of overcoming those fears through knowledge and empathy. And out of emotion and idea, a plan to rescue his friend. He heads to the dragon's cages and rides one of them to reach the ships. His friends show up and join the plan. Meanwhile, the Vikings are already closing in on the nest and find wrecked ships everywhere. They land on the island and cut a hole to get into the cave. The place is full of fleeing dragons. Desperately, when the invasion begins, thinking they had finished the task, the Vikings celebrate. However, Stoic realizes that Chimuelo is very scared and understands that the battle has just begun. Suddenly, they hear a loud roar coming from the bottom of the cave and the queen appears. The catapults don't even tickle that monster, so the Vikings have to flee to the ships. However, the dragon is determined to eliminate them and sets the ships on fire to prevent his enemies from escaping. While Stoico and his men try to survive the attack, Chimuelo tries to flee the Bird on fire but can barely move to increase the survival chances of the remaining warriors. Gobert and the tribe chief team up to get the monster's attention as the others try to escape. When the battle appears lost, Hiccup and his friends appear mounted on their stoic dragons, and the rest of the Vikings cannot believe what they are seeing, men and beasts being friends, or what they thought they knew about the dragons, and about Hiccup collapses. At this point, the friends distract the queen as Hiccup goes in search of Chimuelo, finds him on the ship, and tries to free him from the bonds. However, the queen ends up destroying the ship in what? It causes Hiccup and Hiccup to fall into the water that the dragon is still trapped and sinks without being able to save itself, so Hiccup goes immediately after him. He tries to take the chains off his friend but ends up losing his breath and nearly faints. At that moment, his father appears and pulls him out of the water. Then I'm jumping back into the ocean and freeing Chimuelo. The dragon pulls him out of the water and calls Hiccup to battle. The two team up to defeat that monster, but before they take flight, Stoic approaches his son and says, "Forgive me for everything. I'm proud to call you my son." Hiccups and Chimps catches the queen's attention, and they do. This one flies towards them. The queen sets fire to everything around her, and Chimuelo's prosthesis catches fire. They need to make one last attack, as soon they won't be able to fly. They begin to lose altitude and wait for the monster to chase them. When the creature releases the gas to ignite them, Hiccup asks Chimuelo to throw his bolt into the monster's mouth, and the creature's body catches fire. The queen can no longer fly, crashes into the island, and causes a massive explosion. While trying to escape the fire, Chimuelo loses his prosthesis and can no longer fly. He crashes into a rock, causing Hiccup to fall off the animal. Chimuelo dives into the flames to save him. I'm running after them, but he only finds Chimuelo. He doesn't see his Stoic son. He breaks down crying, regretting his son's life. Stoic apologizes from the bottom of his heart, and it is only after this that Chimuelo spreads his wings and reveals to Hiccup whom he protected and saved. Hiccup was safe because of Chimuelo. Thus, this dragon, as in Norse legends, ends up being a treasure keeper. Let's remember what I said before. Dragons used to be guardians of treasures, representing the final obstacle that the hero must overcome on his journey, full of challenges and internal struggles against his fears and... Personally, when our challenges are defeated, the hero wins the treasure in the same way. In this story, both Hiccup and Stoic confront their deepest fears. Stoic radically transforms his view of dragons and learns to accept his son's differences, while Hippo reveals his true identity to his father, showing himself proud of her. This battle is also an emotional and symbolic battle. It is the moment when Hiccup dares to reveal his true nature, and Stoic expresses his pride in his son, as he is when Chimuelo spreads his wings and grants them their greatest reward, a father relationship. Strongest son, grounded in mutual understanding and respect, the dragon gives them his reward. In this sense, Chimuelo also acts as a guide to a new era of understanding and harmony between two worlds and two people who were previously too different. Days later, Hiccup wakes up and Chimuelo is next to him. This one can't believe that his dragon is in his house and worries that his father will find him there. Hiccup, when he gets up, discovers with a jolt of reality that he has lost part of his left leg. The initial surprise is mixed with a sense of loss. In this difficult time, Chimuelo not only gives him comfort, but also converts. An essential pillar to be able to walk, the help that Hiccup once gave Chimuelo to fly is now reflected in how Chimuelo becomes his support to walk. Now they both share a similar disability, an unexpected bond that reflects how adversity can create stronger bonds. Opening the door, Hiccup can't believe what he sees: Vikings and dragons living together for a few seconds. He thinks he's dead, but his father appears at his side and he realizes that his example accomplished the impossible. His father tells him apparently what we really needed was more of this, and points to Hiccup's entire body. His son smiles incredulously, replies, "But you just pointed out my whole being," and his father looks at him proudly and nods. Astrid appears and gives Hiccup a kiss. Gobert hands him the new prosthesis he made for Chimuelo, designed to fit with Hiccup's new prosthesis, and when they fly together they are closer than ever. But now they're not the only dragons and humans flying together. The meshing of the two seems to symbolize how our personal losses and shortcomings can unite us through our disabilities. Maybe we can find common ground, a way to connect and support each other. They are our imperfections and challenges, which often do not get closer to others. The relationship between Hiccups and Hiccups portrays how vulnerability and the need for support can be the catalyst for deep and meaningful relationships. With understanding and mutual support, we not only overcome difficulties but transform them into strengths, creating something bigger and more valuable together.